And the last one is marine mammals have horizontal tail, and the sharks have vertical tail, which actually tells you how they actually swim. So marine mammal swims up and down, and fish swims left to right. Okay. So if you see an animal that has a blowhole, horizontal tail, and a mammary gland, and have scales, this is a very confused animal and might not be an animal. It is some kind of a mysterious animal. It could be a mermaid. So going back, let's go back and focus on fish. So there are two types of fish. There's the bony fish, which is the astactites, and the cartilaginous fishes, which is the chondroctites. As the name implies, the bony fish have bony skeleton, and the cartilaginous fish have cartilaginous skeleton, which is made of cartilage. So what are cartilage? Cartilage is the same substance as what our nose or our ears are made of. Hindi siya matigas, medyo malambot siya, flexible. So if whenever you eat, say, a shark, hindi ka matitinik as compared when you eat a bony fish. But I don't recommend for you to eat sharks. So the bony fishes have gills that are covered, while cartilaginous fishes have uncovered gills, and the bony fishes have scales. And as what the Kahoot question is, cartilaginous fish or sharks have scales, but they are tooth-like, and they are called denticles or placoid scales. Ito yung parang ng papel de liha pag nahawakan mo siya. Kasi masyado siya maliliit na masyadong sharp, just like teeth. So the teeth are attached to the bones for bony fishes, and cartilaginous fishes have teeth attached to gum. No glass bladder for bony fishes, but there's glass bladder for bony fishes, and no glass bladder for cartilaginous fish. External fertilization for bony fishes, and for cartilaginous fish, merong internal fertilization. Merong male private parts, which is called clasper for male, and for female, they're called cloaca. It's an opening. So what are elasmobranchs? Elasmobranchs are a dominant group or cartilaginous fishes. They come from a Greek word elasmos, which means plate, and branchios, which means gill. Kasi di ba nga, when they first saw it, kita nila na expose yung mga plates of gills na mga elasmobranchs. So there are two main types of elasmobranchs. There's the sharks and the bathoids, or sometimes you call it true sharks or flat sharks. Why it's called true shark? Kasi ito yung mga shark na para talagang isda. They're fusiform and cylindrical in body. While the flat shark, as what it's described of, is dorsal ventrically flattened. So parang flat siya. The main difference that you can see here is that the pectoral fin of a shark is actually separated from the head, while in flat shark, it is continuous expanded attached to the head. Okay, as just to give you an idea on where they have almost exactly the same parts, but pero it's in different parts of their body. So the gills of a shark or a true shark is on the side, while the gills of the bathoid, the flat shark, is under ventral side, which is below. So hindi siya on the dorsal side. So there are around 1,000 species of sharks and bathoids. And there are more bathoids than true sharks. There are 500 plus na flat sharks and 400 plus na true sharks. So there are many, actually. And we go to that particular aspect of how they could actually reproduce as compared to a bony fish. So for example, a blue shark and a Spanish mackerel, which is a bony fish. Their lifespan is blue shark has a longer lifespan as compared to a particular Spanish mackerel, but their maturity is much later. Their maturity is much later. They cannot reproduce before their maturity, but the Spanish mackerel can mature even on their first year. The litter size for a blue shark is around 27 to 75 pups, of which 54% could only survive to adulthood, while a Spanish mackerel can have 4.3 million eggs and up to 75 survive per day. The capacity to reproduce is every 2 years for blue shark, while a particular mackerel can have multiple times a year to reproduce. The gestation length is 9 to 12 months, but for Spanish mackerel, just 24 hours. So why am I saying this? You can see how vulnerable the sharks are, say in terms of, say, if you go fishing. If you go fishing and take 1 million of blue shark and 1 million of Spanish mackerel, which do you think will actually survive the wild, and which do you think will be threatened to extinction? It's actually the blue shark, because they cannot produce well. That's the reason why, based on their taxonomic properties, their low reproductive potential, and low capacity for population increase, these natural threats are the reason why they are threatened species. Diba? Kasi nga, they cannot reproduce that many. It takes time for them to reproduce. It takes time for them to mature, and they only reproduce a small amount of litter. So threatened to extinction na. Out of the 1,000 species of whales, of sharks and rays, almost 36% of those species are already threatened to extinction. So threatened siya. Siguro sabi ng iba, okay lang naman na threatened siya kasi nakakatakot siya, di ba? So that brings us to the next question, sharks attack. Kumakain nga ba sila ng tao? So I want again to ask you for a poll. To answer the poll, this poll. Are humans part of a shark's natural diet? Yes, no, enlighten me the answer. Okay. So that you'll know, most of you says they're not part of their natural diet, which is correct. They're not part, because in the first place, we don't live in the ocean. So hindi naman talaga tayo part of their natural diet. So why are there shark attacks? So again, natural diet of sharks, because they have sharp teeth for holding and cutting prey. Most of the shark eats are fish, squid, birds, and marine mammals, such as whales, dolphins, those kinds of things. But there are other sharks who are filter feeders. There are only 3 filter feeder sharks, which is the whale shark, the basking shark, and the megamouth shark. They don't use the teeth for feeding, but they use the gill rakers to filter zooplankton. Okay. So how they actually eat? So yung sensory mechanism nila, they're searching deep in the waters, and whenever they see something below the surface of the water, they will actually initiate the run to collect information. Kapag on the way there, pag alam ay hindi naman pala siya pagkain, they will abort and based on other, kunyari, could be their smell, or could be, kasi una is more visual, and then could be smell or could be hearing or something. Pero kapag nakita niya na there's a potential that's a food, they will take a bite. So kakagatin nila. So from that bite, there are 2 options that they could do actually. They could abort and reject, or they could actually bite again or ingest or eat it. So why is this very important to know for the reason for the shark attacks? Because from the view of a shark below, they could only see a silhouette on the surface of the water. And a human surfer and a sea turtle and a sea lion could actually look the same from below. So ano nangyayari? They will take a bite. And then if it's really a food, if it's a sea turtle or sea lion, they will eat it. But if it's a human surfer, most of the time, nakikita natin for the shark attack is there's only one bite for the shark. Hindi yung talagang kinagat ka na sa kaliwang kamay, kakagatin ka pa sa kanan na kamay. Isang kagat lang talaga. So most of that are there's only one bite. Ang kaso lang, most of the time it's fatal kasi malakas yung jaw ng ano. So napagkakamalan lang ang mga tao as food because they look the same as this diet of the shark, which is like a sea turtle and a sea lion. So what's the reason for the bad reputation of sharks? Again, it's Hollywood. All of these movies portray sharks as a threat to humans. Kahit na itong animation na Finding Nemo. So, a professor on University of South Australia made analysis of movies from 1958 to 2019. Of the 109 movies that they analyzed, 105 of them actually overtly portray sharks as a threat to humans. Out of the 4 that are not, 3 are covertly portray sharks as a threat to humans. It's only 1 doesn't portray. Do you know which one it is? It's the sequel of Finding Nemo. It's Finding Dory, because the only shark there is a whale shark, and a whale shark, they didn't show whale shark as a threat to human. So going back to the Philippines from Hollywood, as we all know, the Philippines is an archipelagic country, and we're surrounded by waters. And definitely, we are a biodiversity pathways of these 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 or sharks and rays. And there are 4 notable areas that are present, where sharks are rays are present, such as the whale shark, which is a feeding aggregation in Donsol. And there are cleaning stations on Monterey and 𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏, a cleaning station of treasure shark in Malapascua, and there's a number of strandings of megamouth sharks in Cagayan de Oro. There are approximately 200 species of sharks are found in the Philippines, but there may be more. Hindi lang talaga na-report because there's not much researchers around the Philippines. So what are the sharks that we can find here in the Philippines? There's the whale shark, the biggest of all sharks, the biggest of all fishes. They are protected. There's the largest fish in the world. They have very unique spot patterns in their body. Treasure shark, they are protected. They are notable for their tail, which is 50% of the total body length, which they use to stun their prey. So, ano lang nila, parang nilalatigo lang nila yung mga isda para makain nila, para ma-stun at ma-paralyze, and then they eat. Hammerhead, based on their name, this head looks like a hammer. It's protected in the Philippines. Megamouth sharks, it's not protected, although we have a lot of strandings of megamouth sharks in the Philippines. Second only to Japan. There's just less than 200 sightings and strandings of megamouth all over the world. We do have sawfishes, which is protected based on the name. They have unique saw-like rostrum and snout. Oceanic manta rays, protected, the biggest of all 𝗹𝗏 rays. Why are they called 𝗹𝗏 rays? Because of their cephalic fins, which looks like a horn, and that's why they are called 𝗹𝗏 rays. The reef manta rays is also protected, and their smaller cousins, the 𝗹𝗏 rays, are also protected. But there are those that we can see actually on the market or supermarket. There's a blue-spotted stingray. They're not protected. They're least concerned, but their cousin, which is a ribbon-tailed stingray, is near threatened, and both are commonly caught in the fisheries throughout the Philippines. So how do we utilize or see sharks in the Philippines? Sharks and rays are sometimes caught as a target for fisheries. They actually being targeted as food. Itong kamukha nitong mga devil rays or manta rays, tinatapan nila yan. Or in Bicol, they use shark meat or ray meat and shred it and cook it in coconut milk, malunggay, and chili. And they have this delicacy called kinunot. So aside from the meat, some of sharks are targeted because of their fins. Why are fins targeted? Because in Chinese customs, they a shark fin soup is actually a status symbol. Na kapag meron kang Chinese soup na binigay during an occasion, ibig sabihin meron kang kaya. Aside from that, there are problems with bycatch. Those that are targeting, say, other fishes, sometimes may nahuhuli sa net ng mga sharks. And most of the time, these are disregarded in other places, but in the Philippines, ang huli ay huli. So, kakainin na rin talaga yan. But there is one kind of utilization that doesn't involve killing them. They realize that sharks are more alive, worth more alive than dead, is through tourism. So there are places in the Philippines where you could actually swim with the sharks, such as in the 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏 for tertiary shark. You scuba dive. In Donsol, you could actually swim with them and try to interact with them. So this gives us an opportunity to do actual research and try to identify them and through their spot patterns and stuff. So aside from being important as they give actually revenue for the municipality through tourism, the sharks are very important in our ecosystem because removal of sharks reduces feeding pressures from other organisms, resulting to abundance of less desirable species and eventually affecting the whole ecosystem. For example, what if we remove sharks? If we remove shark, other mesopredators such as rays will actually increase. If they increase, mauubos na rin yung mga bivalves natin such as clams, oyster, and scallop. So once you remove the shark, the one that will be extinct next will be the bivalves and the clams. Pag nawala din ng bivalves and clams, wala rin kakainin ng ating mesopredator, eventually they will also die. And that collapses the whole full food chain. So aside from that, it doesn't only affect the food chain, it also affects the ecosystem. That's what it is.
Sir, there's no sound po yata.
Eat the larger fish. This cycle of life continues and keeps a balance in the ecosystem. Now let's see what happens when we take sharks out of the ecosystem. With nothing to eat the larger fish begin to eat all the algae-eating fish. With no algae-eating fish left to eat the algae will continue to grow, eventually overtaking the coral reefs. So, with the loss of sharks, you can see how easily the ocean ecosystem is thrown out of balance.
So as you can see, hindi lang talaga yung food chain ang naapektuhan. It's the whole ecosystem, pati yung coral reef ecosystem has been changed, and eventually it died because it was covered with algae, because there's no more algae eating fish. And with that, I could actually end and go with the next, and I thank you all for listening. And do conserve PA sharks and support 𝗦𝗲𝗏𝗃𝗿𝗏 and 𝗹𝗶𝗵𝗵𝗁 Philippines. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful talk, Mr. Aka. Anya, are you here? Can you take the floor?
Yeah, that was amazing. I feel like I learned so much in just 10 minutes. It was great learning about shark anatomy and everything in between, and I'm pretty sure our audience feels the same way. So I hope you guys are ready for our next speaker. So our next speaker has worked in Philippine conservation, terrestrial, and marine since 2003 as a conservation educator, biologist, and technical staff. Her field research experiences are in marine mammal ecology, coral reef restoration, coral reef, and mesophotic fishes and coastal fisheries. She actively practices science communication on social media platforms and has also worked as an education officer for over 7 years in different organizations, including the Philippine Biodiversity Conservation Foundation, Fauna and Flora at the Fauna and Flora International, and Center for Tropical Conservation Studies at the 𝗬𝗏𝗻𝗃 University. She currently is an Erasmus branch specialist for Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines and a member of the IUCN Shark Specialist Group. So without further ado, here's Ms. Jean 𝗬𝗏𝗃𝗿𝗏. Clap reacts.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Let me just get my share screen on. Thank you for this invitation to talk today about sharks, or that really interesting introductory talk about the biology stuff. So my talk today is actually going to be about the conservation part of our work. Okay, host, I'm gonna need you to enable participant screen sharing.
Mai, can you make Ms. Jean co-host? Okay, Ms. Jean, I think it's okay na po.
All right. So can you all see my screen now?
Wala pa po.
Is it there?
Not yet, Miss.
Okie dokie.
We can see it na po, Miss.
Okay. Right. So you can see it now, right? The screen share.
Yes po. We can see it.
Okay. I had some technical issues earlier today. So I was a bit worried about this presentation. But anyways, Like I mentioned earlier, Elson had all the biology stuff and some of the threats covered. My part of the talk is going to focus more on the conservation in the Philippine context. So I'm currently a master's student at 𝗬𝗲 University, but I've been working on sharks around since 2010, so about 11 years already. I'm a member of 𝗏𝗏 Shark Special Group, and I'll talk a bit about those two groups later. I'm also a specialist with Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines, and that's one of the projects that I worked with together with Elson. So this talk, because I was briefed that this is your events have a lot to do with the SDG 14 or Sustainable Development Goal 14, which is life below water. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this goal, it's to conserve and sustainably use the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Now, I want to emphasize the word use, sustainably use. No? So, because a lot of times people think conservation is all about protecting and preserving species. But sustainable development actually has a lot to do with sustainable use of resources. So you'll see later on how this impacts a lot of the conservation actions and decisions at a global level. So this particular SDG 14 has a total of 10 targets or actionable targets. So among them, I've just highlighted some that I'll be discussing in this talk, and some of them that on an individual level you can participate in. So there's targets on reducing marine pollution, protecting and restoring ecosystems, working towards sustainable fishing, conservation of coastal and marine areas, as well as increasing scientific knowledge and supporting small-scale fishers. Okay, so sharks in our seas, Elson had this covered earlier. There are about 200 shark species in the Philippines. This already includes your true sharks, 𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗿 sharks, or still cartilaginous fishes. So my talk will cover the following topics: the threats and conservation actions. I was going to talk a bit about roadblocks, pero I decided at the last minute to take it out because I think we're going to run out of time if I discuss that as well. Okay, so before we start, I'd like to gauge what you think is the greatest threat to sharks. So can the host, I'm not sure how I can access the polls from here. Can the host enable polls? Okay, so what is the biggest threat to sharks? I'll give you 10 more seconds. Okay, it's a close fight. I'm ending the poll right now. Okay, so it was a really close fight. The choices were climate change, overfishing, shark fishing, plastic pollution. And it was pretty split between the four. There was supposed to be a fifth choice that was shark finning. And I'll explain later why that was also part of the original choices. But this pretty much shows me na most of you have a fairly good understanding already of what the threats to sharks in the Philippines are. But later I'll discuss what is the greatest threat to sharks in the Philippines. So I'm gonna go with now into the part where we talk about threats. As I mentioned, Elson already covered some of these topics. So some threats include pollution. So this is some plastics that were found inside the gut contents of a dead whale shark that had beached in 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃𝗏 in Negros Occidental. So it wasn't the cause of death, but potentially marine pollution can cause significant harm to sharks and rays, especially in terms of entanglement or where they could drown. Ingestion, maybe it could cause some long-term health effects. So pollution is one problem. Unsustainable and or poorly managed tourism. So these are some examples from when the 𝗏𝗏 tourism started. Ship strikes or propeller cuts from boat encounters. So this is also an example from 𝗏𝗏 when the tourism had just started and wasn't really regulated yet. Cultural and traditional values. So Elson mentioned earlier about kinunot, about shark fin soup. On this right side here, these are 𝗏𝗂𝗃𝗿 stingray tails. So in some parts, especially in Region 6, there are some beliefs that putting stingray tails outside your door will ward off the aswang and you'll be protected. And then there's skin. The skin can be used for leather and furniture. There's also the aquarium trade. There are some souvenirs, souvenir items made out of shark products, jaws and teeth as well. Yep. And now we talk about fisheries. So direct catches. These are usually for export of shark fins and use of shark liver oil for beauty and health products. Now I want to talk a bit specifically about fisheries. So direct catches means it's targeted fisheries. Now, I mentioned earlier sa polls na I wanted sana there were supposed to be a fifth choice na shark finning, because a lot of times people confuse these terminologies when we talk about shark conservation. And this is really important when moving forward, you plan for conservation actions, especially with regards to policy enforcement or some legislation. So shark finning happens at sea. It's when you remove the fins and just dump the rest of the body back in the water. Shark fishing, on the other hand, is you take the whole shark and you take it back with you and you land it, and almost all the parts are utilized and sold. So they're usually, this is what we call landed fins attached. So FNA, fins naturally attached. No, so when it's landed, the fins will be taken off. That's a higher market value, so it's sold separately. The meat can be sold also. The liver in some species can be sold. No, so almost all the parts are utilized when we talk about shark fishing. Then we also have bycatch, which Elson mentioned. So this is often because of these are just sharks that are caught from other fisheries, and it's largely unmonitored and unregulated, and it has multiple uses. So the poll kanina asked, what is the greatest threat to shark? And it's actually overfishing. No, this is simply because it's not targeted fishing. Overfishing is when we fish for different species of marine resources. No, so different kinds of fishes, different kinds of fisheries, and it happens when we take too many fish and take them too fast. So the rate of replenishment can't cope. So over here, this is an idea of sustainable fishing. It's very targeted when you're only catching the fish that you want to catch. But unsustainable fishing or overfishing oftentimes means that you're catching everything that goes into your net or your gear. No, so it's not targeted, it's not selective at all, and that's when you have bycatch. So in the infographic, this is actually based on the 2014 paper by Nicholas 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗏𝗏. It's where it estimated 1/4 of the world's sharks and rays were threatened with extinction. But just last month, 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗃 and his colleagues published a new paper citing that it's now 1/3 of all the species of sharks and rays in the world that are threatened with extinction. And the primary cause they found is overfishing. Okay, so now we familiarize ourselves with the threats. We know what some of the problems are. How do we take action to mitigate or reduce these problems or solve them altogether? So there are different ways to go about conservation. And this is mainly because fisheries especially are often complex and intersectional issues. So when we say intersectional, it means na it's not just a research issue. It's not just a science issue. A lot of times, because it involves communities, it involves cultures. We have to talk about social science as well. Take into consideration cultural values, politics, economics. So there's a lot of different aspects to consider, and not just the science part to consider. And then in terms of conservation actions, there are different levels of conservation action as well. So there are individual actions. For instance, an example would be committing not to eat tempura or fish balls, because I think it was 2014, there was a shipment of tempura in Cebu that was confiscated, and it was found to contain thresher shark meat, if I'm not mistaken. So this is something that some people I know do, that after that issue broke, they committed to stop eating tempura. Another thing that my other colleagues and friends do, especially those coming from Southeast Asian families, like from Hong Kong, Taiwan, China, is that they've tried to convince their family members to stop serving shark fin soup at celebratory occasions. No? So like weddings is very typical for them to serve shark fin soup. So I know some of my friends have actively tried to convince their family members to stop serving shark fin soup. So these are some examples of individual actions. Community actions can come from the community members themselves. So say, for instance, a fishing village where there's proposed legislation to ban a fishery or to reduce the fishing pressure, and the fishermen voluntarily comply with the fishing regulations. So sila mismo ang magsasabi na, okay, we agree to a fish closed season, for instance, no, where certain months of the year they won't fish for that species. Or sila mismo will come up with ideas for diversification of livelihood. So this is, when we talk about diversification, it's not necessarily an alternative livelihood where we replace shark fishing with another livelihood. Diversification mainly just means na you're reducing one income and adding another to compensate for that. So you're diversifying. It could mean na fishermen are saying na, okay, we'll only go out like half a month, and then the rest of the month we'll do something else like carpentry or drive pedicabs. So that's an example of community actions. And then other conservation pathways that are usually on organizational or governmental levels is through research and policy. So sa research na part, I mentioned earlier that I'm a member of 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗍 Sharks, and we're a scientific advisory board, and we're tasked with the national assessment of species population health. So we use a different metrics for this. Like for instance, in biology, what we know about the species, do they reproduce fast? How many young do they produce in a year? Where do they live, what kind of habitats need to be protected, and what are the threats to their population, what are the threats to the species, what are the threats to their habitat. So all of these together will go into a system, a scoring system, and we can assess which species need priority conservation action. So this is under the Wildlife Act, Republic Act 9147. And there's actually the policy itself, Philippine Aquatic Red List Committee, is really huge. There's terrestrial and marine and aquatic. So we are just, etong nasa picture na to, we are just a very small part of the entire policy. We're the subcommittee for sharks. So we're in charge of assessing all the shark and ray species and chimeras in the Philippines. Similarly, on a global scale, this is pretty much also what IUCN Species Survival Commission does. So if you're familiar with the terms na vulnerable, critically endangered, all those terms are because of the IUCN Red List categories. No, so the Red List itself is, as I mentioned earlier, it's based on different metrics. So it goes into a scoring system, and then we get to make a decision whether a species is threatened or not. So when we say threatened species, we actually mean 3 categories, and that's vulnerable, endangered, and critically endangered. I won't go into the details na of what separates these 3. Mainly, what separates them is the number of years that they're projected to go extinct if no action is taken. So critically endangered usually implies that the population is too small, or their habitat is also too small, and the threats are increasing, no? And that they might, if we don't take action now, they might actually go extinct in the next 10 to 20 years. So it's something like that, no, ang scoring with the red list species. So IUCN SSG, or Shark Specialist Group, is responsible for global red list assessments of all sharks and rays. So that's a lot, because I don't know if Elson mentioned this, how many species there are of sharks and rays in the whole world. It's, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 1,400. So it's a lot of species to assess, and we can't assess them every year. So ang nangyayari with assessments, usually they happen every 2 or 3 years, depending also sa budget and sa time na makommit ng mga global experts. And sa National Red List, it also depends on the time that your national experts can also commit to meeting and doing these workshops, because it's a lot of work. It's taking all the scientific research, everything we know about each species, and studying them and scoring them and making that decision whether or not they're threatened species. So before I move on to the last pathway, which is policy, I want to see if you can guess how many species of sharks in the Philippines are protected species. So host, start. Okay, so how many sharks and rays are protected in the Philippines? Okay, I'm gonna give you 10 more seconds. Okay, right. So 30%, again, it's a close fight. Some of you seem to understand that it's 21%. So it was 21%, 21 species before 2019, but in 2019 there were a few other species added onto that list. So the correct answer is actually now 25 species, and I'll show you why. Okay, so we have 25 protected species right now because according to our national law, the protection is, ang legal basis niyan is yung amended fisheries code na RA 10654, specifically yung section 102, which automatically protects all CITES listed species in the Philippines. So yung mga hindi familiar, CITES is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species. Convention on, illegal trade, I think. My gosh, brain fart. I forgot kung ano yung CITES, but basically CITES is a United Nations Convention about trade of endangered species, no? So sa Philippines, we have 25 CITES listed species of sharks and rays. And so those are the only species that are protected in national waters. And I put there na threatened species does not necessarily mean protected species, because if we look at all the species of sharks and rays in the Philippines, we actually have over 70 species that are in the threatened species category. So in terms of protection, we're not doing enough for those threatened species. 25 is only a small portion of the combined total na threatened species that are in the Philippines. And so because of this, Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines launched a campaign to support some of the shark conservation bills that have been proposed in Senate and Congress. No? So if you want to, and if you haven't yet, please check out the bit.ly link here on this slide, or not, or go to the Marine Wildlife Watch Facebook page and look for their infographics about this Conserve Philippine Sharks bill to show your support. So very quickly, these are the 25 species that are currently protected. So as you can see, sa sharks, we have whale shark, we have the great white shark, silky shark, oceanic white tip, and then 3 species of treasure sharks, 3 species of hammerheads, and then 2 species of mako sharks. Sa mga rays naman, we have 6 species of 𝗏𝗏𝗏 rays. So dati, itong 𝗏𝗏𝗏 alfredi and 𝗏𝗏𝗏, these used to be manta, yung genus nila, but taxonomy sa mga rays has been really complicated these past years. There's been a lot of taxonomic changes. So now they're all 𝗏𝗏𝗏 genus. So that's 6 species, and then there's 3 species of sawfishes, 2 species of wedge fishes, there's 1 guitar fish, and 1 giant shovel-nosed ray. So that's a total of 25 species. So when we say protected, bawal hulihin, bawal ilan, bawal patayin, bawal ibenta. No, so it's full protection essentially. But in terms of bycatch, that's still a gray area in terms of how to implement this law. Pinag-uusapan pa din ito in multi-sectoral discussions with BFAR, and the enforcement agencies, as well as the different scientific groups. So in summary, I'd just like to highlight that conservation issues are often complex, multi-sectoral, and intersectional. So it's not just science, it's not just us scientists who get to decide and say na, oh, this species is threatened, we should protect them and we should ban all fisheries for this species, no? Because we always need to take into consideration the other aspects and factors. So cultural importance, economic benefits, social factors like communities that will be affected. So brings me to my second point, which is conservation requires action at different levels. So there's a lot of ways. On an individual level, you don't have to be a scientist, you don't have to be a politician to do something about it. You can already help directly by saying, I don't want to eat anything that's shark product. I don't want to keep a baby shark in my aquarium. Or you can help address some of the more indirect impacts, such as pollution, reducing your plastic waste, and just go back to the Sustainable Development Goal targets, and you'll see there more the targets, especially with conserving habitats. I think that's some of the ways that you're still helping, although it's indirectly, but you'd still be helping conserve sharks. And then lastly, always keep in mind that sustainable development is only sustainable when the solutions are equitable and benefits everyone. So that's all. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Miss Jean. I personally loved how you even like touched on the policymaking involved in conservation, because that's not really a conventional subject when it comes to topics such as this. But anyway, how are you guys? Like, are you still alive? Buhay pa ba yung audience? Give us reactions to show us if you're still here. Okay,
Yes.
awesome. I am seeing some thumbs and some party emojis. That's great. Okay, so I think we're gonna go move on to our Q&A portion now. Maybe invite both of our speakers to turn their cameras on and join us up here.
Okay. I think we can start. Can we start, Mr. Elson, Miss Jean, with the Q&A?
Ready when you guys are. So I'm pretty sure this is the segment most of our audience members are excited for. What about you guys? Hi, Miss G. Nice to see you again. Hello, Sir Elson.
Yep.
Okay, so are you both ready for question number 1? Okay, just unmute yourselves. Anyone can go first. So question number 1 is, what is the effect on the ecosystem when sharks are placed in large aquariums instead of them being freed in the ocean?
Elson ba? Ikaw
Pwede
na?
na ako. Ako na. So, kasi if you put them on, say, large aquarium, you're actually getting it from the wild. So you're lessening the chances of it being to reproduce and to So I don't think, for me, it's always, if you want to conserve them, you conserve them in their natural habitat and not put them on some cages or aquarium.
Yeah, so I somehow agree with Elson's point. But I've worked in conservation programs sa terrestrial in a past life. Sa terrestrial, no, so I'm actually familiar with captive conservation. Pero for marine kasi, it's very difficult to rear them. I know that there are some species that can be reared in the wild, so it would depend on whether or not where your stocks come from. If it's from wild population, that definitely needs to be regulated, because that will have, as Elson mentioned, that will have an effect on the wild population and their capacity to reproduce and replenish and fulfill their ecological functions. No? But if there are coming from captive stocks, meaning from zoos and aquaria, that are, kasi yung zoos and aquaria, they also have their own association. That's, and they have some regulatory processes then. So if it's coming from captive stocks, it can be okay lang. Yep. So
Thank you
next
so-
question.
Okay, thank you so much for the answers, Mr. Elson and Ms. Jane. So for the next question, for the speakers, what motivated you to move past the fear of sharks, if ever you were, and their reputations, and instead study and advocate for these organisms?
Um, ako kasi I grew up in Manila and I don't actually have an experience on ocean. Nung nag-aral ako sa Australia, then I get to appreciate the ocean and be on the water. The thing is, I still have fear for sharks. Well, for other species of sharks, but it's more of a respect. Hindi siya talaga fear. Kasi these are their home, and we are just visitors of the ocean. Kasi and I do think that well, these living things have their meron silang role in our life that they should be conserved. Parang yeah, I do think na all of us are very important, and these sharks, even though they're fearsome, are also important.
Yeah, so similar kay Elson din, it's more of a respect kasi um, I think I also clarify no that just because we study sharks and rays is that it doesn't mean now we're always diving and interacting with them in the wild. A lot of my interactions are actually from market surveys, so they're dead na specimens. I've only interacted in the wild with whale sharks, and they're harmless because they're filter feeders. Although nakakatakot pa din yung sobrang laki niya, na parang mahampas ka if ever. And then thresher sharks in 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏. Kabado siya kasi it's fearsome, but it's also understanding the situation that you're in and having a respect for the animal. So like sa 𝗏𝗏𝗂𝗏, the situation there is that that's it's like a spa for the thresher sharks. So they're not going to that shoal to feed. That's not where they feed. It's where they get cleaned by wrasse, like thinner wrasses. No, so it's a spa place for. You don't really have to be afraid of being attacked by these sharks because it's their day off. It's their relaxing time. It's their me time. So it's really more about just understanding the situation you're in, understanding what species you're dealing with, because not all species are apex predators, not all species are aggressive. No, so most of them are actually just really chill and want to be left alone.
Well said, you guys. So for our next question, does China's presence in the region contribute to our struggle to ban shark finning in the country? Interesting.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, shark finning happens at sea. So a lot of our fisheries data here in the Philippines actually, we don't have so much na onboard data. So which is in some countries kasi they monitor fish monitors on those fishing vessels, like government monitors on those vessels, monitoring if they're catching what they're supposed to be catching and not anything else, and complying with regulations. No, so shark finning happens at sea, and here sa Philippines we don't really have that data much. And what we're seeing really is the threats to sharks here is more on shark fishing, which is being landed whole. In terms of the fin trade, we can't really say for certain kung China's intrusion or proximity to us is contributing to that. Unless Elsa knows the answer to this.
Actually, based nga nung sa 1994 ba yun na data ng WWF, the the parang importer ng shark shrimp dito sa Pilipinas is largely from Hong Kong. So not really China itself, it's Hong Kong. But probably because most of the rich Chinese are there, you know.
Yeah. Also with regards to the trade routes, because the trade routes have been studied, Hong Kong is more of Philippines is more of a supplier, and they've found that Hong Kong is kind of central, so Hong Kong imports and also exports out. So yung mga galing dito sa Philippines are probably not just staying in Hong Kong, they're being shipped out as well to other countries.
Thank you for those answers. I think one of our participants is raising her hand or his hand.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to our speakers. Thank you very much for the information that you shared this afternoon. Anyway, I would just like before I ask the question, I would just like also to add to one thing that you have discussed earlier. Though both of you have said that you have not encountered most of the sharks underwater. I think because I have been with a lot of sharks in my lifetime, and that includes from the small bamboo sharks to tiger sharks to even the hammerhead sharks. And I think the one thing that also has to be included in maybe in your next webinar is to also discuss how the sharks behave when there is a person underwater. That's one thing that people normally forget when they see sharks. They get excited or they get afraid. But the thing is, sharks are also just like people. They give off signals. So when you understand what that signal is, then you will know how to react. If the shark is, let's say, curious, or if the shark is telling you that you have to move away. Okay, so my question is actually for Ms. Jean. I'm actually very interested on the aspect of your conservation lecture, because I would like to know, because there's a lot of sharks have different hunting strategies. Some of them are nocturnal, some of them are not. So when you are actually doing conservation work and doing your research on identification, because that is part of how you quantify the current shark population or the current shark numbers in our country, whether they are threatened or not. I wanted to ask, in what methodology do you undergo this, how to say this one, this identification of the figures? It's just based on fish by catch, or do you actually go into the water? Because the methodology itself, if you rely based on daylight survey of sharks, then it will give you a different numbers when you are also working at night, when you are looking for sharks, and at what depth are you limiting the study to, because a lot of sharks are also deep water. So I'm just interested in how these are done or in how these are categorized. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. It's actually a lot to unpack. Pero so here's the thing with research is there are different ways to go about research, and the one thing that we struggle with here in the Philippines, especially, as you mentioned, different sharks occupy different habitats, they have different behaviors. So ang hirap talaga pag-aralan in the wild, no? In fact, there are only a few species here in the Philippines that actually have been studied in the wild, like whale sharks and thresher sharks mainly. Yun lang talaga in the wild, most of the published studies, because it's very expensive to go diving all the time. It's very expensive to deploy satellite tags. It's very expensive to deploy underwater videos. So a lot of, ang laki pa ng, basically, ang laki ng information gap natin. There's a lot that can be done, pero it's always restricted by budgetary constraints and the people to do it. Because halos walang pera and it's very expensive. There's very few scientists who are actually doing wildlife, like in on-site nga research, no? And so in terms of assessment, what we actually use to assess the species is published data or personal communication with the research experts who are doing fieldwork, or published or publicly accessible fisheries data from the government and other organizations. And so, kung maalala niyo yung sa red list na there's only 3 threatened categories, but there are other categories there. There's one category called data deficient. So kung kulang yung publications, kulang yung available information for that species, because scientists didn't, that species is likely to get scored as data deficient. So ang example niyan ang mabibigay ko is yung blue spotted stingray. Now very common sa market natin. You would think na it's well studied, but it's not. Like we don't have any data with regards to its population, its wild population. We have a lot of fisheries data about it, but we don't have data about its population, its biology. And so hanggang ngayon, it's still, yung global assessment niya is still data deficient. No? So ang binabasehan talaga namin is yung available na research and information to assess these species. I hope that answered part of your question. I think hindi niya kinaya i-answer lahat, but I hope I got most of it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jean, for the answer. Related to that, there's this question that were submitted in the registration. What human behavior encourages or agitates sharks' uncommon scary behavior, and how can we help stop spread negative assumptions about sharks?
I don't know if Elson was gonna answer that.
No, ikaw muna, sige.
Like I said, kulang yung experience ko in the wild, but even so, just understanding the biology of sharks. So Elson presented earlier yung sensory mechanisms of sharks, no? So it has that pretty standard behavior. It uses all of its senses. So malalaman mo, and they tend to be very inquisitive. Basically, kung maalala niyo yung slide na yun, no, it can be sense of smell, yung unang magti-trigger, or visual stimulation na magti-trigger. They also have lateral lines on their body, so any kind of movement or displacement ng water in the water column will also trigger that. They also have electroreceptors in their snout. So if kabado ka when you're in the water with a shark, they're likely to pick up on that, because that sends out electrical signals in the water. I think si Elson will be able to expound on this more. So yung mga ganyan kasi, you don't need to be experienced so much, but you just need to have a better understanding of their biology to be able to respond better when you're in that situation.
So di ba ang role talaga, actually, one of the roles of the shark is actually to create a very strong population. Kamakanyang if there's a school of fish, ang nakukuha nila, ang nasisense nila is getting the weaker ones. So ang natitira dun sa school of fish na yon are the stronger ones. Kaya gumaganda yung genes ng population ng school of fish na yon. So yung sense ng shark na yon is actually they could actually sense which ones are weaker, which ones are struggling, and which ones are So kamo ano mga sinasabi nila, you should be relax ka lang if there's a shark. Don't panic kasi they will sense that. In terms of yung para maalis yung about shark, there are ways na ginagawa, kunyari there are Shark Week. Pero I think what is kulang with the Shark Week of the Discovery Channel is to actually try to parang put in yung parang conservation efforts na ginagawa to protect the shark and to to remove that kind of bad reputation of shark being a threat to humans and stuff. So I think that is one way actually to remove that kind of notion that sharks are very ano. Pero yun nga lagi natin tatandaan is while we are in the water, we are just visitors, and they are the ones who are home to the water. So we should actually try to respect them and do what unnecessarily things na ano, wag mo sila ipoprovoke and stuff like that. I hope I answered the question right.
Yeah, you guys did awesome. So I'm gonna go read one question from the chat here. It was sent by Galope from Tree Book, and it says, why does the government allow tourism without giving knowledge to people or the management to avoid hurting the sharks or marine life? So I think they're talking about the government not informing people about how tourism affects sharks and marine wildlife.
Okay, I think there are efforts actually to do that, to have sustainable tourism. Minsan nga lang, because we talk about money and the money that will actually come, sometimes hindi nakokontrol and they forgot about the sustainable part of the practice of tourism. There are places that there are parang mga introduction or merong mga ano na why they are doing that and why the tourism. But the thing is, yung spoken words is different from the action. That's a different thing. So there are ways na ginagawa to inform tourists, but sometimes yung action when you are in the wild na, sometimes you forget it because of excitement eh. Kasi wow, whale shark or wow, treasure shark. That's why that's the role of the guides, the tourist guides, to actually remind them. And then wag yung talagang ay since turista yan, sige pabayaan na natin kasi magdadala ng pera yan. We shouldn't actually think that way. We should always think long term na if we let this practice continue, it may actually drive these animals out of that area.
Thank you so much for that answer. Speakers, would it be okay to ask one last question because it's already 5:05 p.m.
No worries. Okay na naman.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any medicines that have shark as ingredients?
Alam ko meron sa beauty products na yung mga shark liver oil, mga ganon. Medicine, sometimes pag pumunta ka sa Binondo, makita ka merong mga nakabote na maliliit na sharks. I think I do not know how they actually use that for medicine, but I think they use it for that purpose. Pero it's a wrong notion that since shark doesn't have cancer, that they have the parang answer for cancer. So hindi pa talaga na-establish yung ano na yun, yung thought na yun.
I also have to add that sharks actually do get tumors, no, mga growths on their as well. Not necessarily cancer. They're still looking into that, pero it's to prove na yung mga sinasabi nga na they have a cure for cancer. Pati nga daw COVID last year, may nagsabi na sharks can cure COVID. Wala naman. I know that there's squalene is apparently a component of vaccines, not just COVID vaccines, but vaccines in general. Pero it's not primarily sourced from sharks, yung squalene. It can be sourced from other alternatives as well. So I know yung iba ginagamit din for collagen supplements. So but this ang kokonti pa lang talaga. We don't know much about its medical uses. But there have been some people, especially abroad, looking into the trade. That's how much of it is going towards medicinal use, no? Pero hindi pa yata nila pinublish yung results nila and findings.
Thank you so much, you guys. It was really interesting to hear how some people were trying to use sharks as COVID cure. Wow, I didn't think we'd go as far as that, but thank you both so much for answering those questions. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time for the remaining questions, but Miss Jean sent her Twitter handle in the chat, and she said that you guys could go ask her additional questions there. What about you, Mr. Elson? Do you have any platform where our audience could reach you if they have questions?
Facebook lang.
Yes, Facebook lang, guys.
Yeah.
Just look him up.
Or also the Marine Wildlife Watch of the Philippines Facebook page. You can drop the questions there, and the page admins can answer or let Elson and myself know about those questions.
Thank you so much. So to formally end our Q&A portion, let us first watch the promotional videos from our event partners who made this whole thing possible. So tech team, take it away.
As a student, you will face challenges where you will be overwhelmed, fail, doubt yourself, and lose confidence in what you're doing. These struggles cannot be handled alone. You will need assistance, guidance, and interaction to learn and relay knowledge to prepare yourself better for the future.
That is why here in Technological Improvement for New and Keen Engineering Students, also known as SEGA Thinkers, we commit ourselves to develop civil and geological engineering students and shape them in applying this knowledge in solving real-life situations. It is a community where we share our technical expertise to provide the deserved quality of life that every Filipino community should have. SEGA Thinkers not only caters to the SEGA students of the 𝗵𝗲𝗄 University, but we also involve ourselves in the whole institution to encourage quality engineering education.
We will walk with you as you face your endeavors in discovering and creating an effective solution to the local, national, and international problems, issues, and concerns. Not only that, the SEGA Thinkers also acts as a family and knows the importance of human interaction as to why we engage in social involvement like games with lots of prizes included. As part of this institution, we will make a difference in the future of our world, earn honor by thinking, and shall provide knowledge by doing.
My destination is to become a licensed civil engineer and to be able to help out my family.
My destination is to become a licensed civil engineer.
My destination is to become an engineer for sustainability.
My destination is to become a successful civil and environmental and sanitary engineer.
My destination is to become successful as My destination is to become a transportation engineer in Japan.
My destination is to be a licensed sanitary engineer of Malolo City and to help out my family.
My destination is to become a licensed engineer and to travel around the world.
My destination is to have a successful career in construction.
My destination.
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 Hi, welcome to the island. We're Mission Isla. By the year 2050, there will be over 1 billion climate refugees, and many of these people will come from the Philippines. As a reaction to this statistic, Mission Isla was born. So what exactly is Mission Isla? Mission Isla is a non-profit youth organization centered on creating climate change solutions for developing island nations in Asia Pacific. Our aim is to create local solutions and use them for global action. We do this by focusing on 5 key points. 1. Climate change and biodiversity loss. It's no secret that the Philippines is a melting pot for so many different species. Climate change threatens all of those species, not just us. 2. Decolonizing environmental education and making it accessible to everyone and supporting grassroots projects. The environmental education we have today is made up of whitewashed things our ancestors have always known and lived by. 3. Indigenous peoples' rights and international laws. Indigenous peoples have always been the Earth's staunchest defenders. We owe it to the environment to defend its protectors. 4. Climate change's threats to human health. Climate change is a health hazard. It's not just the Earth getting sick from various pollutants and bacteria released from melting ice caps. People get sick too. And lastly, point number 5, circularity and responsible consumption and production. It's common knowledge that our consumption and production habits have to change, but this can only be achieved at the fastest rate through adopting a circular economic model. What we produce should eventually go back to the environment without causing any harm to it. Mission Isla was created by 7 young people for the 7,000 and beyond. We can save 1 billion people from becoming climate refugees by saving today.
So civil engineering and environmental and sanitary engineering are pillars of sustainable development goals.
Let's not stop in improving ourselves. So that's how we excel. We learn from our mistakes, and that's the way towards excellence.
We deserve to be an EdSec. Why? Because every day we are encountering environmental science. Every day you are encountering environmental problems, and as EdSec, you will be responsible. You will be the engineer that solves this problem.
Hi everyone, Roria Senior here, the founder and head of 𝗬𝗵𝗄𝗃 Project. 𝗬𝗵𝗄𝗃 Project was established in April just this year, and currently we are composed of more than 40 youth members who are striving to work on our environmental advocacies on education and information dissemination, as well as deforestation through the use of native species. We use the engagements on our Facebook page to generate a specific number of trees, such as number of reacts, comments, and shares. From May to August alone, we have already generated a total of more than 1,000 trees. And last August 27, we have conducted our first tree planting activity. However, due to the limited manpower and health restrictions, we were only able to plant 100. So by October this year, we are planning to conduct another activity to plant the remaining 900 trees. 𝗬𝗵𝗄𝗃 Project aims to continuously improve our system, to expand our network, and conduct more projects that will further environmental advocacies. So if you want to connect with us, you may simply send us a message on our Facebook page, or you may simply DM me. So that is all about 𝗬𝗵𝗄𝗃 Project. Thank you.
Hello, so we hope you guys enjoyed those videos from our wonderful event partners. So this is the full org list, so you can get to know our partners. The first one, we have done this in cooperation with 𝗬𝗏𝗄𝗏 PICE, 𝗬𝗏𝗄𝗏 PSSE, Mission Isla, Movement Against Plastic Pollution Ilocos Norte, Soul Winners PH, and 𝗬𝗵𝗄𝗃 Project. This event was also co-presented by CEGE Thinkers, Earthshaker PH, East's TSSP MSc, ICPMA MSc, League of Young Catalysts, Project Biodiverse Citizen, and 𝗬𝗏𝗃. So now that you know all our partners, I'm going to give the floor back to Adam so he can talk to you about something very, very special that I think all of you will like.
Thank you so much, Anya, for that. So before we end, I just want to announce to each and every one of you here on Zoom and on FB Live that Project Blue Ilocos is actually open for applicants, for volunteers. So it is until October 7, and we do applications twice a week. Twice a year. I'm sorry, twice a year. So please scan the QR code for the application form. And here are the teams, the committees open. So externals, public relations, they handle everything related to sponsorships, partnerships, and the publicity of the organization. External social media, they handle the branding of the organization and manages all its social media accounts. Internals research, provides research and content for PBI's posts. Also helps brainstorm to create projects for PBI. Internal secretariat, they handle everything related to the organization internally, including the documents and secretariat duties. Finance consists of the treasurer and handles everything financial related to the organization for transparency of the projects and donations. Creatives produces publication materials for the organization and consists of experienced graphic designers, photographers, and videographers. And lastly, engineering team. So this consists of young engineering students, young engineers, and we also have an advisor. They design and brainstorm ideas for projects that require engineering, and work includes computations and CAD modeling. So there you go. Those are the teams. And with this webinar, of course, all the teams work together for it to happen. And yeah, I think Anya, you can go back and take the floor.
So don't forget to scan the QR code to join, or to just simply type in the link flashed on your screen right now. It's bit.ly PBI 2021 apps if you want to work with Adam or me and the rest of the team, if you want to be part of things as cool as this. So for now, we will move on to the presentation of certificates to the speakers. Okay. Could we flash the certs on screen? Okay, here we go. So the first one is a certificate of appreciation for Mr. 𝗬𝗃𝗃𝗏 for his phenomenal presentation as a speaker for Sea Sessions, the Mighty Shark, organized by Project Blue Ilocos, held on the 2nd of October, 2021. Give him some claps, you guys. The next one is a certificate of appreciation for Ms. Jean 𝗬𝗃𝗏𝗏 for her phenomenal presentation as a speaker for Sea Sessions, the Mighty Shark, organized by Project Blue Ilocos, held on October the 2nd, 2021. Thank you so much, speakers. Okay.
I think we can do a photo op with the speakers, with the certs. Mr. Elson, are you there?
Yep.
Can you turn on your, okay. Tech, can you take a photo na lang?
Hello, I'll take a photo. Okay, everyone. Smile 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay. Okay, wait, saving lang. One more bar.
Maybe we can do a wacky one.
Okay, wacky. Okay, 1, 2, 3, smile.
Let's do one where we're all sharks, like that. Yeah, we're sharks, huh? Not a yoga group.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you so much for that.
I think we can have a photo op with the participants to all those who want to join.
No pressure if you don't want to turn your camera on, but if you would like to be in the photo, just turn your camera on so you can be in the picture.
Tech, can you stop screen share so that we can do gallery view? Okay, let's remove pins and spotlights.
Oh, it's so nice to see everyone finally. And it's nice to see that you guys are still alive and kicking. Like, I know you're hungry and you want to eat dinner now. Hello, everyone.
Wow, there's a lot of faces here.
Okay, we're gonna give you guys a few more seconds to turn your cameras on.
We have 5 pages today, so
wow.
So keep smiling while taking photos.
Yung mga nag-ask ng question dyan, ayaw niyo ba mag-turn ng cam on? No pressure. Joke lang. May pressure.
Okay, I'll start taking photos now. Keep smiling. First page, smile. 1, 2, 3. Next page. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Third page. Oh, wala na naka-on cam. Okay, yun lang. Wanna do the shark thing?
Okay, let's all be sharks in this photo.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. First page. 1, 2, 3. Hold your poses. Next. 1, 2, 3. Smile. Yay. Okay.
Wow, look at us, guys. We're such a photogenic org. Such a photogenic event. Don't you guys agree? Okay, well, to formally close our event, I'm going to give the floor back to Adam, because I'm sure he has a ton of nice things to say about today.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank each and every one of you for attending our first ever webinar. I hope that you got to learn a lot from the speakers as much as we did. And of course, thank you as well to our speakers for imparting their knowledge to 150 plus or about even 200 people who have participated in this webinar. We hope that a lot were inspired and a lot will be caring more about sharks and spreading awareness on sharks, and then talking about that they aren't really what they are portrayed to be, that they are the devils of the ocean or something, because they are really really important for the ecosystem. And yeah, we really hope that since this is a webinar series, sessions, we hope that we get to see each and every one of you once more in our next one. And yeah, I think that pretty much sums everything up. And for the remaining attendees, please wait till the end for the evaluation form for the certificates, for the e-certificates of attendance and participation. And yeah, I think I could conclude the event now. And again, thank you so much, Miss Jean and Mr. Elson, for imparting your knowledge and for being here. And yeah, I think that ends this webinar. Again, thank you so much. Okay, before we forget, okay, so this webinar is made possible by and co-presented by Project Biodiversity Citizen, 𝗏𝗏𝗃𝗏𝗃 PH, East PSSP, League of Young Catalysts, ICPMA, Sega Thinkers, and CD. And once again, to reiterate and to go back, PBI is open for volunteer applications, and we hope to see each and every one of you in our next events. And yeah, we hope to empower and raise more awareness in the advocacies of ocean pollution and marine conservation. Thank you so much. Once again, I'm 𝗍𝗵𝗏𝗏𝗃.
And I'm Anya from PBI and everything else.
And we are your hosts.
This was Sea Sessions, The Mighty Shark by Project Blue Ilocos. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Here is the QR code for the Shark Eval. Please answer it so that you could get your certificates. Thank you so much, po. Thank you so much, Mr. Elson and Ms. Jane.
Thank you, everyone.
Hello, for the evaluation form, let me ask the team for this issue. Thank you so much. In the meantime, the QR code is working. Kindly scan that. Thank you.
Hi everyone, if you have access to the link and the QR code already, the correct link, do feel free to go take your dinner and exit the Zoom room. Thank you so much.